Okay, so this is my week 4 coding assignment. I have my console here and my code all written here. Problem 1 was to create an array called ages with these values, which I did. Then we have problem 1a, which was to subtract the first element in the array from the last without referencing the exact number. So I used ages.length minus 1 to reference the last element in the array minus the first element in the array, because I used 0 here to pull the first element in the array, which is 3. Then I console log the result, which we see is correct here. 93 minus 3 is 90. Moving on to 1b, I added 10 to the end of the array with the .push method. Console logged ages to make sure that it was actually added, which it was. Then I used the same code as before, subtracting the first element from the last element, which would now be 7, and we see the result there. 1c, I had to use a loop to iterate through the array and calculate the average age. So I declared a new variable sum, let it be equal to 0, wrote my for loop here so that it would iterate through the array. I did sum plus equals ages with the, I don't know how to say this, but the element, the index of the element right here. So once I get that total and it stops running, I have a new variable here, which is average is equal to sum divided by ages.length, which should give me the average of all of the numbers in the array. Console logged average is 26.66666. I did check that with the calculator and that's correct. Problem 2, create an array called names that contains these values, which I did here, and console log to make sure that it came up correctly, and it did. 2a, use a loop to iterate through the array and calculate the average number of letters per name. I wrote my loop here, have a new variable letters. I had that plus equals to names I dot length. Then I divided that result letters by names dot length and console log the average here, which we see is right there, which again, I used a calculator and checked and it is correct. 2b, use a loop to iterate through the array and concatenate all of the names together separated by spaces. I use names.join. I had to look up the join method, use the space here, and we see that comes up over here, 2b, Sam, Tommy, Tim, Sally, Buck, and Bob. 3, how do you access the last element of an array? I had to use Google to find this answer with slice, and then the -1 to reference the last element of the array. Tried it and I got Bob, which is the last element, so that is correct. 4, accessing the first element of the array using 0 to reference the first position in the index. Console log that, and I got Sam, which is also correct. 5, create a new array called name lengths. I did that here. Write a loop to iterate over the previously created names array and add the length of each name to the name lengths array. This one took me a couple tries because I didn't realize I was getting a result that was a string rather than an array. So when I moved on to number 6 and was referencing this name lengths array, I wasn't able to calculate the sum of all the elements in the array because it was a string, not an array. So I just kept getting a result of 1. So I came back up here and realized that I had to push the answer from this loop into the array. So that's how I could get the result there, which in 5, I now can see that it's an array, which leads me to 6, where I was able to reference that array, and then get the sum of all the elements in that array, which is 23, which was correct. 7, write a function that takes two parameters. I did that here, question 7, the parameter word and n. I used a fat arrow function to say, take whatever I put in on this side and do this, which was concatenating the word to itself however many times the argument that we pass in for the parameter n is. So I did Chelsea and 5, so that returned over here question 7, Chelsea 5 times. I don't understand why I'm getting this undefined. I get it after a couple of my problems. I've tried a couple things and it just started messing with my code, so that's something I'm going to ask in a mentor meeting. But I did get the correct result here in 7. Question 8, write a function that takes two parameters, first name and last name. I did that here, and then returns the full name when it's called. So I use the fat arrow function and template literals to console log Chelsea Alfaro. It's right here. 9, write a function that takes an array of numbers and returns true if the sum of all the numbers in the array is greater than 100. So this is my function, numbers function. I wrote array for my parameter to remind myself that it's an array that I need to pass in there. Used a fat arrow function to run my for loop. As I run my for loop, I am doing sum of array, which I declared right there, plus equals array I. If sum of array is greater than 100, return true, else return false. Then here I have this where I tested it. So in 9, we see it return true, so that is working. 10, write a function that takes an array of numbers and returns the average of all the elements in the array. I have my function average element array, fat arrow function, wrote another for loop here. So I'm getting my result here, average plus equals array I, array divided by equals to array dot length, and then console log my average. I tested that here. This one was really easy because I was able to use the same code pretty much as what I had written in problem 2. Console log then question 11, write a function that takes two arrays and a number, or two arrays of numbers, and returns true if the average of the elements in the first array is greater than the average of the elements in the second array. So this one took me a minute, but I figured it out by declaring two variables here so that I could write two for loops. I could have that run through for each array, and then I can compare the array down here in my if statement. So if average of A, which I defined up here, is greater than average of B, which I defined there, console log true, else console log false. I tested that down here, and we see that that is correct. I do have that undefined again. I'm not sure why. Problem 12, write a function called will by drink that takes a boolean is hot outside and a number money in pocket and returns true if is hot outside and if money in pocket is greater than 1050. This one took me a minute because I wasn't writing this in correct syntax. I was doing is hot outside is equal to true, and I was using one equal sign to equate it rather than show that this would needs to be loosely equal to the Boolean value true. And I was putting parentheses on each one of these, so it wasn't returning correct answers for each one of these console logs. If the first one was true, then it was printing the whole thing as true. So I had to play with this a little bit to write this all as one string. To return true, else return false if they were not within the specified values up here. If money in pocket is greater than 1050 and is hot outside is equal to true. I ran a bunch of tests on this one to make sure that it worked. Ended up getting them correct eventually. 13, I did pretty much something similar to 12 because I started writing this before I could get a correct answer for all of these, because I wanted to see if I wrote another one from scratch, if that would help me figure out what was going on up here. And it did, actually, because I don't know, I was just thinking of this one differently than I was this one, so I was able to figure out that I needed to change my syntax up here, is where the problem was coming from. So this is pretty much the same as that one. If is tired and has time are both equal to true, then I console log I can take a nap, else console log sad no nap today. I did push this all through to GitHub, which I have over here in week 4. This was my last update when I added comments to my code. And this is my code here.